20 years ago, Hyundai were making cars anybody with even an ounce of self-respect would have point blank refused to drive. I mean, just look at these examples, for God's sake, they are dull, bland and lifeless. Now though, they are making some much more interesting metal in the shape of the i30N and the Kona Electric, and in 2019 they managed to sell over double the amount of cars than they sold in 2001. Now, whilst that on its own is quite an impressive achievement for a company to have made in less than 2 decades, I reckon it's Hyundai's image transformation from colostomy bag to designer handbag is even more impressive. I'm Blee, and today we're going to do a deep dive into Hyundai's sales history to try and figure out what it is they've been doing so right. Now obviously my use of the term designer handbag in that intro is a bit of an exaggeration, as Hyundai aren't quite a Range Rover or an Audi yet, but you know what, I don't reckon they're a million miles away. But anyway, in order to figure out exactly what it is Hyundai have been doing quite so right, I've decided to take it upon myself to download their European sales data for the last 20 years. Now please don't click away yet, I know this sounds dull, but I promise you it is actually quite interesting once you get into it. So headline figures first. As we can see, in 2001 Hyundai managed to shift 225,693 cars and SUVs. And in 2019 that figure had grown to 532,850 cars and SUVs, and that is just over a 136% increase in sales. Now as you can see, we do have the figures for 2020, however due to the impact COVID had on the world and sort of retail in general, I've decided not to count that as a proper year. But yes, between 2001 and 2019 Hyundai did really well. My favourite thing about this video is that digging into the stats and the figures, I've actually been able to identify what cars and what models it is that help them increase their sales in such a dramatic way. Right guys, just a quick interruption to let you know that hitting subscribe, liking the video and leaving a comment will massively help the channel out, so it's greatly appreciated when you do that. Right, so at the start of the video I did identify some of the rubbish that Hyundai were making at the turn of the millennia. However, regardless of my opinion on their cars, this data does show that in the early noughties Hyundai were actually doing not too badly, all considered. As I've just mentioned, this data does show the sales by model, so I can see that the fact that Hyundai are doing quite well in 2003, 4 and 5 is mostly down to the Hyundai Getz and the Atos. Apologies if I'm butchering that pronunciation. Now, passenger car sales did take a bit of a turn for the worse in 2004, but the mid-size SUV, the Tucson, was launched midway through that year, and that proved to be a sales hit, and that helped keep that overall sales up during that period. The Santa Fe SUV, which was a slightly bigger car, that was also proving popular. And whilst none of these cars are particularly exciting, and I still stand by the fact they're all a bit dull, reviews at the time basically cite the fact they're spacious, offered good value for money and came with a 5-year warranty as reasons to buy them, and as the sales figures sort of should suggest and show, that was enough to get punters to the showrooms. Now moving forward a few years, we can see that there is a bit of a lull in sales in 2008. Now I reckon that is partly down to the model lineup getting a little bit old and tired at that point, but it is also worth remembering that there was a financial crash during 2008, and that obviously isn't going to help things. But as if Hyundai had somehow almost predicted that, in 2008 they launched the i10 city car. Now reviews of that car at the time said it was spacious, it came with plenty of standard equipment and offered good value for money. And that last point about good value for money is rather poignant, because in 2009, during the financial crisis, the government in the UK at least introduced something called the scrappage scheme. And on this scheme the brand new i10 could be bought for as little as £4,995. Now obviously I reckon that went some way to making this car such a roaring success. In 2009 it is quite impressive that the i10 accounted for just under a third of Hyundai's total sales in Europe. And I think this year, and the fact that i10 sold so well during this sort of crisis period, helped put the brand on the map for consumers in Europe. Alongside the i10, the new i30 and i20 were also doing well during this period. Now, the i20 was a replacement for the Getz I mentioned earlier. Interestingly, in a review of the i20, it mentions that Hyundai had asked customers and people who own the Getz what they could improve with the new car, and I think that's quite a good thing and shows Hyundai were really trying to improve their product. Again, reviews at the time say the i20 and the i30 both offered good value for money, they were well built, spacious and came with plenty of standard kit, and you will see that this is kind of a standard theme for Hyundai as we move through the years. But anyway, from 2009 we've got a good few years of growth with this trio plus the iX35, which was also known as the Tucson, doing quite well in terms of figures. Also, 2 cars I even forgot existed, the iX20 and the i40 came out in 2011, and they were both popular additions to the range, and they helped make the sales graph look nice and upward during this period of time. Now we do get another slight lull in procedures during 2013 and 14, and I think that is basically because it's between generations for the ever popular i10 and i20 models. Obviously people ain't going to be rushing out to the dealership to buy a car that is going out of date. But once those new versions of those i10 and i20 models were in showrooms, sales once again started to pick up. Now a review of the i10 at the time did call it the best car Hyundai ever made, which was a bit of a claim, but basically it kind of built on what was making the older cars good, so it was still offering good value for money. It was fairly spacious and it offered a 5-year warranty, but this time it also had improved refinement. And I think this shows that Hyundai was serious about improving their product. They kind of kept what was good but added something extra that made it appeal to even more people. Now, obviously, as mentioned, this is reflected in the sales figures, and the new generation i10 did really well. Moving forward a year to 2015, and we see the introduction of the all-new Tucson, and I think this model really put Hyundai on the map. Not only did it offer great value for money, but this car was also quite a stylish looking thing. I don't think stylish is perhaps a word you'd use to describe any of the other cars I've mentioned up until this point. Obviously this has been building for a little while up until this point, but I think with the introduction of this brand new Tucson and the i10 from the year before, that kind of made people see Hyundai as more than a budget option, and sort of as a bit more of a desirable and pretty good car company to get involved with. Now this has been cemented over the last few years with the introduction of some attractively priced EVs that come with some impressive range figures, and obviously the introduction of a personal favourite, the i30N. And the i30N was a hot hatch that came out of absolutely nowhere but took the fight straight to established rivals such as the Golf GTI. I mean, what's not to like about that? And it is very impressive of Hyundai to have done so. And that kind of brings us up to date with what Hyundai have been up to. And to be fair, the recipe for their success is a fairly simple one. You see, looking at all of this, you can kind of see a theme. You sort of make a decent product, you price it attractively, and then you look to improve on it with the newer versions. And obviously they've also added some sort of additions to the range throughout the time period. But yeah, it's basically quite simple. Make a decent product, price it effectively, and then improve it with the new ones, and don't lose sight of the old things you've done. I'm sure in a boardroom somewhere in Korea there's probably a very fancy diagram explaining all of that, but yeah, in layman's terms, that is all I think Hyundai have done. Now, do I think that moving forward they can maintain this level of growth? Well, I'm not so sure. I think it might be a little bit unrealistic to expect the next 20 years to be quite as successful as the previous 20 years. However, I do think their immediate future is looking good. Freshly launched, you've got the all-new i10, the i20 and the Tucson, and they all appear to be doubling down on the styling front, sort of firmly placing Hyundai in a kind of desirable category opposed to just a budget option. In addition to that, I think the next up on their list is to make their cars fun to drive, and I think that i20N is testament to that. On the EV front, well, they've got a pretty good base, you know, like I said, their EVs are well priced and they've got a good range, so I can't really see them cocking that up either. I think as long as they don't really use their USP, which is good value for money, I can't really see them going far wrong as we move forward into the future. But yeah, that's kind of my video. It's kind of wrapping up now, and as you can probably tell, I quite like Hyundai now, and I didn't like them 20 years ago. Obviously, I'd be intrigued to sort of know what your opinion is, so feel free to let me know in the comments what you think of this brand. But yeah, I think it's been quite an impressive journey for Hyundai, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do as we move forward. I've been Blee, thanks for watching, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.